Hello, everybody. Welcome back to yet another Genre Guys. And we are here with, as you can tell from Lorn's expression, baffled, not quite sure what we just watched.
Bewitched, bothered, and bewildered are we.
Yes, bewitched, bothered, and bewildered are we because we watched The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai across the 8th dimension, and it, I don't know, expanded my consciousness into various dimensions because I left this movie feeling like I had, how do I put this, altered my perceptions of reality. We'll put it that way.
But just to be clear, you were high on life, man.
Yes, yes.
But the best description I've seen was in a review that said, in other words, The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai is your typical sci-fi / action / comedy / rock and roll / kung fu / political satire / neo-western / guys on a mission extravaganza. That kind of sums it up, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Like we're starting this bit of a trend of movies where I start to question my own sanity after watching them, and this certainly takes the cake. This is, I don't even know how to put this into words. Like this movie is just off the wall, and I think the best way to begin is to summarize the film with the yellow text at the beginning of the movie, setting the stage.
Yeah,
so
there you go.
Let me begin. Buckaroo Banzai, played by Peter Weller, born to an American mother and a Japanese father, thus began life as he was destined to live it, going in several different directions at once. A brilliant neurosurgeon, this restless young man grew quickly dissatisfied with a life devoted solely to medicine. He roamed the planet studying martial arts and particle physics, collecting around him a most eccentric group of friends, those hard-rocking scientists, the Hong Kong Cavaliers. And now, with his astounding jet car ready for a bold assault on the dimensional barrier, Buckaroo Banzai faces the greatest challenge of his turbulent life. While high above Earth, an alien spacecraft keeps a nervous watch on Team Banzai's every move. Yeah.
Well, yeah. That kind of sets the scene a little, doesn't it?
That's I mean, as soon as I saw that, I knew that this wasn't your typical film.
You have to remember, this thing was first envisioned as a series of comic books. And this is, without even knowing they were doing it, I'm trying to think of the timeline here, but it's not before Star Wars, but it's certainly before they decided that the first Star Wars was really the fourth one. So this is, no.
This movie came out in 1984.
Oh, okay.
A New Hope was retitled A New Hope after The Empire Strikes Back, which came out in 1980.
All right. Well,
and then
the point is,
came out of 83.
This follows on the conceit that the audience has been following his adventures in other ways before. And indeed, at the very end, kind of like those old James Bond will return in whatever the next movie was, this one ends with a thing saying that Buckaroo Banzai will be back. What is it? Buckaroo Banzai versus the World Crime League or something like that. World Crime League,
yeah.
Yeah. Well, so it's meant to be an episode in the life, and boy, what a chock-filled episode it is.
Yeah, it's really good at making the bizarre and almost the absurd seem normal, and everyone is taking it in stride. It's not played up, like it's not. I don't even know how to put it. Like, you walk into this film feeling like you're stepping into an adventure halfway through. I can only imagine how much lore building occurred prior to this movie, because you feel as though you've missed the first 3 movies walking into this.
Well, and the guy who wrote it said that he wrote several screenplays once he came up with this character. And each time he got about 40, 50 pages in, gave up, threw it away, and started another one before he found a way to make it work, or by his standards, if not by all of ours. So,
like this picture right here of John Lithgow, who plays
Dr. Emilio Lizardo, a.k.a. Lord Worfen,
yes,
of Planet 10.
That's a really good visual summation of how I felt watching this movie. What do you think, Lorn?
I really don't know how to talk about this movie. I have been trying to think of what to say about this movie all day. the first thing that I said when I finished this movie is we were talking in our back channels, and I said, whose idea was this? And
because I was, of course, going to get the blame because I usually get the blame, but it wasn't me. It was our audience.
So, yes, he has thrown the audience under the bus for this. And so I blame all of you. If you are watching this, this is your fault. And I'm not very happy with you right now. I don't know what to make of this. To me, this movie feels like somehow a bunch of people scammed a studio out of a lot of money, wanting to make a college skit kind of a thing. It's like you had a bunch of buddies that just said, we're all stars. We can convince somebody to do this.
Well, they weren't really all stars at the time. I mean, not in the way that they became. I would say
don't know.
Probably the
Peter Weller was
one would have been Lithgow, but
Christopher Lloyd's in this.
Yeah, he wasn't famous then.
Taxi.
Look.
Well, by the way, speaking of 6 Degrees of Separation, Christopher Lloyd being associated with all those must-see TV sitcoms. Did you know that the part of Fraser Crane was originally written for John Lithgow?
Oh.
Isn't that interesting?
I did not. But
yeah.
So for the sake of the audience listening to us, though, I'm going to read out some of the cast members. Peter Weller as Buckaroo Banzai. Then you have John Lithgow. You have Ellen Barkin. You have as Penny Pretty. Jeff Goldblum, Christopher Lloyd, Lewis Smith, Rosalind Cash, Robert Ito, Ronald Lacey from Indiana Jones fame, Matt Clark, Clancy Brown, William Traylor, Carl Lumley, Bill Henderson. I mean, Yakov Smirnoff was in this.
Yes. And you probably could have had a Smirnoff first, Lorn. You might have liked it better.
Did you catch Jonathan Banks? Did you get him?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, he's in this movie, and it just blows my mind. You've got all these people that I know are capable of doing more and so much better, and yet they did this. And I understand it's a cult classic. One of the things I was talking to somebody else about this movie after I watched it, I actually kind of went down a rabbit hole trying to understand why do people like this. And I was talking to somebody else, and he said, well, were they making it this way deliberately? Is it sort of a satire of these type of movies? And the thing is, I'm not sure. And I feel like in these type of movies, if you're going to satirize it, you better be sure. And I think that's where part of my problem with it comes from.
Can I answer the question yes and no?
Okay.
I think yes, they intended to make it this way. And no, it wasn't really a satire. It was kind of an alternate universe take on all of the classic tropes of sci-fi, of adventure, of all the things that are in the movie. I'm on the record. I like it. I don't think it's a great movie by movie standards, but I like it because I'll tell you why. It would have been easy to do this halfway. It would have been easy to say, well, we'll throw in a few quirky things for the people on drugs and everybody else will be fine. But they committed. There's that old joke about the difference between involvement and commitment can be seen in a plate of ham and eggs. The eggs were involved, the chicken was involved, but the pig was committed. Well, this movie is committed to being its own weird, strange thing. And on that score, you have to admit it certainly succeeds. Now, whether that makes for a great storytelling or entertainment, I leave it to anybody's judgment. But
darn it, Lou, you stole my committed joke. I was going to say the people who put this thing together should have been committed.
But, there you go.
But my take on this was that it was a classic pulp type of sci-fi story told through the distorting lens of the 80s. I just want
to point out that on the far left, you have Jeff Goldblum playing a cowboy from New Jersey.
Yes, absolutely. Which is interesting because the first Western of any note in the history of the movies, The Great Train Robbery, was shot in New Jersey. And by the way, what I had forgotten until I watched it again, one of the great strange science fiction pseudo events in the history of the state of New Jersey took place in a town called Grover's Mill. And it is that Orson Welles, when he made his famous War of the Worlds radio show as a kind of a faux newscast, and people believed it on Halloween, and I think it was 1931, He had the Martians
1938.
landing at Grover's Mill, New Jersey. And, well, it turns out that's used in the plot of this as being the cover for these aliens from another dimension actually coming to New Jersey. And,
Rastafarian aliens.
well, no, that's the other guys. That's the black aliens. These are the red aliens. These are the bad ones. That Lithgow is kind of a symbolically the same as a certain, as I'm told I have to say, a German World War II leader on this far-off planet called Planet 10, who has been exiled to Earth and is locked up in an insane asylum under his Italian name. By the way, I don't know if you saw in the credits, somebody credited, I can't think of the name now, I could look it up, but it doesn't really matter, as John Lithgow's dialect coach to do this very hammy Italian accent. Turns out, wait a minute, Lorn, you'll love this. You know
Someone got paid.
He was the MGM studio barber who was Italian. And Lithgow said, I'm going to hang out with this guy and figure out how to do this kind of very vaudevillian, broad, Chico Marx kind of Italian accent. But anyway, it's a wonderfully strange piece of work. And I got to tell everybody out there, if you don't know this movie, you will never know if you react positively, negatively, or something else until you see it. Because as much as we'd like to describe it to you, I don't think we're capable of doing it. It's that wonderfully weird.
That was actually a quote that I saw from John Lithgow, where he was being very effusive about the movie and how much he loves it. And he says that he tries to talk to people about the movie and describe the plot. And he says, it takes about an hour. That's like, I'll bet it does. It's like, if you have to take half the runtime of the movie to just describe what the movie's about, I think that's part of the problem. But, you know, obviously they loved making it. It looks like they had a lot of fun. But again, to me, it's...
Well, the story of the making of the movie is kind of interesting because they somehow caught the eye of a guy named David Bigelman, who at that time was an executive at MGM and later went on to great scandal as the head of Columbia when they found out he was basically embezzling money from the studio to fill his own pockets. But in between, he liked this movie, and he basically said, I like it so much, and then it got delayed because of that writer's strike way back then. And they let him go, and they let the movie go, and he bought it from MGM and took it to Fox and made the picture. But supposedly, he told them, take all that crazy stuff out and just tell it as an adventure story. And they didn't do it. And he thought they would, and they didn't. And they fought, and they fought, and they fought. And at some point, they said, basically, he gave up fighting against them and let them make whatever the hell they wanted to make. So, you know, I didn't know. Did you know that John Lithgow was a Fulbright scholar? Some of the background on this, and when you mentioned all those names, Robert Ito, who plays the Japanese scientist who's working with Buckaroo on this dimension opening gizmo, you might remember him as the assistant to Quincy, as the number 2 coroner with the LA whatever, on the show Quincy with Jack, you know. Anyway, all these people populate this movie. And of course, Ellen Barkin, who was famous for her kind of offbeat style anyway. And she married the head of Revlon and put her career on hold while she spent his money for a while until they broke up. They all have kind of strange lives in their real lives, too. So maybe that's part of how it worked. Here's a 6th degree of separation. Peter Weller became a student when he wanted to be an actor of Uta Hagen. Who's Uta Hagen? She is who played the original role that we watched Elizabeth Taylor do in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf on Broadway. So how's that for a connection between all of these people? And then he was at the studio, an actor studio with Lee Strasberg, who of course was the father of George Siegel's girlfriend in Roller Coaster that we just did. So talk about the connections. Anyway. And as we said, Ronald Lacey, when you watch this movie, you won't believe it, but the guy who plays the President of the United States is the same guy that got the Ark of the Covenant scepter burned into his hand in Indiana Jones. Ronald Lacey, who played Tot, the German agent. For that matter, these guys who wrote this and directed this made some very normal movies, too. Now, W.D. Richter did Invasion of the Body Snatchers and Stealth, and Earl May Rauch did, of all things, God, very, very ordinary, straight-ahead movies, like, what is it, New York, New York, and A Stranger is Watching, and all of these very, very Hollywood straight movies as writers. And how he came up with all this crazy stuff, I don't know, but he did. He did.
Had to get it out of his system.
I guess.
I would say that I thought the funniest part of the movie, which maybe wasn't supposed to be, was in the scene where Penny Priddy is introduced. You know, she's crying during this rock concert.
In the nightclub where the Hong Kong Cavaliers are playing their band gig. Yeah.
Right. And so you've got Buckaroo singing this song just for her, and it drives her to try to commit. Right. That I thought was kind of funny, but you know, I guess I had a dark sense of humor by that point.
I guess you darker than I had thought. But anyway,
it was her or me.
Right.
Well, you guys might be thrilled to discover that apparently there was a 300-page book called The Essential Buckaroo that the creator of this film put together, which consisted of notes and had every incomplete script written over the years. The World Crime League was headed by somebody by the name of Hanoi Jean, and apparently there were references to this person in the original film. You saw Buckaroo's Japanese father being killed by Jean, and Jamie Lee Curtis was set to be Buckaroo's mother. However, the studio head Begelman basically apparently kiboshed all this, and he was adamant that this would be the one and only Buckaroo movie.
Well, it lost money. I mean, that's probably why.
Oh yeah, that's true. But,
it had a budget of $17 million, and its box office was $6.3 million.
But since then, it's gone on to great sales in DVDs and what have you. So I don't know where it's at in the overall grand scheme of things. But it's funny. I was reading Lithgow was always intended to be Emilio Lizardo, and he wasn't sure he wanted to do it. But he said that Richter convinced him by, quote, claiming what a real feast for an actor this wonderful Jekyll and Hyde character was. And he said, I have had roles where I came very close to going over the top. In Twilight Zone, I almost went over the top several times, but this role is completely over the top. It makes the Twilight Zone seem like a model of restraint. I do it in a wild red fright wig and rotten false teeth with a thick Italian accent. And I was wrong. It wasn't the barber. It was a tailor at MGM who was the dialect coach, who was Italian. And anyway, here's one for you. Ellen Barkin described the film as, quote, if Terry Southern had written Star Wars. And those who don't know Terry Southern, look him up. Oh, God. It's
right off the bat. I'm not sure. Okay, so Peter Weller is supposed to be half Asian, half Japanese.
Yeah, well.
That was really, really interesting.
Here you go, Henry. It says that Richter based the Lectroid's alien form on a Canadian-American paleontologist, Dale Russell's Dinosauroid, an extrapolation of what dinosaurs might have evolved into if they survived.
Yeah, but he also based it on some guy wearing a lobster on his face.
Yes, well, there is that. But anyway.
I love
it. And by the way, the costume designer, Return of the Jedi, American Graffiti, The Conversation, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And they said that for the Cavaliers look, they gathered up Gianni Versace, Perry Ellis, and Giorgio Armani sports jackets and suits and ties and mixed and matched them so they all look kind of offbeat cool. Oh, God. Oh, and the cowboy outfit that Jeff Goldblum wears came from Nudies, which was the famous sort of rhinestone cowboy clothing store in Hollywood and then in Nashville, too. They definitely wanted the spaceships to look more organic rather than metal, and so they used seashells and altered them. Yeah.
And they also broke the dimensional barrier in a tricked out Chevrolet.
Right. No, Ford 150.
Oh, sorry, a Ford 150. My bad.
Yeah.
I got a photo of that somewhere.
And Yeah,
But
they got a turbojet engine and all kinds of crazy stuff. And by the way, the original cinematographer, Jordan Cronenweth, halfway through the production, they fired him, and the producers insisted on firing somebody more traditional. And that's Fred Koenikamp, who, by the way, did things like Patton. So, I mean, big people were involved in this stuff. And they rented a bunch of the electrical props that were originally in the Boris Karloff Frankenstein movies. They shot all this in abandoned tire factories and the Water and Power. And anyway.
This feels like Rocky Horror Picture Show, but for sci-fi nerds.
Yeah, kind of. I would suppose so. And anyway, this is interesting. One of the most famous things in this movie are the closing credits, which you can look up on YouTube. They're out there all by themselves and with and without the titles, where they're all just walking, but in rhythm, around the Sepulveda Dam, which is right at the beginning of the San Fernando Valley when you come into the valley. And they said they wanted to do this end credits over a new scene, and they hired a choreographer and a music, but the music wasn't ready. So when you're watching it and it's playing the Buckaroo Banzai theme, when they shot it, what they played with the same beat was Billy Joel's Uptown Girl. So anyway,
this movie was just off the wall. You've got, it just kept getting weirder and weirder and weirder. It left me a little speechless as to what was even happening. And yet all of these actors were taking it seriously. At one point, Clancy Brown gets zapped by this alien spider like bullet thing.
Yeah.
And he's sitting there on the ground dying. And it feels like this really big, heavy, tragic moment between Buckaroo and Rawhide, his close compatriot, which presumably you've watched the relationship develop over the course of the previous 4 films or what have you. And then like a Rastafarian alien pops up. Like,
yes. With a pizza box with
at one point, I didn't even know what was going on.
And by the way, when we talked about it didn't do so great, it had competition. This opened at the same time as Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, which of course also has Christopher Lloyd, and as Indiana Jones and Ghostbusters. And it only opened on 236 screens, so making 6.2 million wasn't that awful considering the competition.
So we have talked about plot points, but
Yes.
nobody has actually summarized the plot of the movie. And Lou, I would like to see you make an attempt.
I was going to ask you, Lorn.
No, I couldn't possibly.
All right. So way back in time, Dr. Emilio Lizardo and the Robert Ito character, I forget his name in the movie, the Japanese scientist, were trying to work on this gizmo that could let you move through dimensions, that you could, rather than going through space, go through into another dimension that exists simultaneous with our own. Certainly not an original idea in movies or sci-fi, that exists in these spaces between the atoms of our world, between the protons and neutrons, electrons, etc. So Buckaroo has actually built it and is testing it in this rocket car out in the middle of the desert someplace and drives through a mountain by theoretically moving between the spaces between the atoms. But when he does, he finds that there are living things in there in the other dimension. And when the car comes out, one of these things is stuck to the car. And when the word gets out to the world that he's actually accomplished this, Dr. Lizardo, who was exiled to Earth by the good guys on their planet, Planet 10, the black Rastafarian lectroids, finds out and wants to go get it and find it as his way back to his dimension. In a way, it's kind of like the what do you call it? Not the neutral zone, the zone in the Superman story where they send all the
Phantom Zone.
Right. It's kind of like Earth is the Phantom Zone for this planet. Anyway, so he's trying to get that gizmo back, and they're trying to keep it, and the good guys are fighting the bad guys to get it. That's the simple version of the plot. But in the process, they meet Penny Pretty, who it turns out is a identical twin to a woman that Banzai once loved and married and who disappeared or died or something. And Anyway, they all get together and fight it out, and the good guys win. That's the short version. But along the way, we meet all these crazy people. How's that? Is that short enough?
Yeah, I mean, you're just giving quite a bit, quite a bit, including the fact that not only was John Lithgow the heavy, but he was backed up again, as we had mentioned before, by Christopher Lloyd, who was playing a character by the name of John Big Boutte.
Yes. It turns out that all these aliens took the first name John and invented last names, and they all worked for this place called Yoyodyne in New Jersey, and have no backstory and no record, and just sort of existed as of that moment, and nobody ever noticed until they started researching it in the movie.
And he clarified to John Lithgow that it's not Big Booty, it's Big Boutte before Lithgow shot it.
Yes, Boutte. Big Boutte, by all means. Anyway, and there's dissension in the ranks among the bad guys, and what they're trying to do, again, is get back to their planet and take over the world. And so the good guys send a message to Buckaroo saying, if you don't stop him, we're going to blow up Smolensk, not Moscow, of course, in Russia, and they're going to think you did it, and World War III will take place and wipe out your planet to keep him from coming back to ours. So there is a time limit involved, and everything progresses from there.
And yes, of course, the president, he's kind of in the background, always calling Buckaroo to figure out what's going on, how the situation is. Buckaroo is something of a huge world celebrity. They drive around in this double-decker tour bus, which is also their headquarters and lab. And he's even got this fan club called the
Blue Blazers.
The Blue Blazers.
Yes.
So at one
the
point,
auxiliary.
The auxiliaries. And so at one point when Buckaroo gets into trouble, they send out the call to all these Blue Blazers, like basically, essentially Club Scouts.
It's like a little orphan Annie's club, yeah.
And the interesting thing about that is, as much as they're all in the science fiction world, they use shotguns and pistols and regular old guns. There are no blasters and no lasers and no photon torpedoes in this thing, at least not from the Earth people. And it turns out, by the way, that they had planned comic books and believe it or not, Apple II, Atari 8-bit, and Commodore 16 and Commodore Plus and IBM compatibles. There was a video game. Didn't go anywhere. Fox announced they were going to do a TV series. Didn't go anywhere. Kevin Smith said he was, in 2016, was going to be adopting it for Amazon. Didn't go anywhere.
Oh.
So, this has been a persistent rumor that it would go further, but it hasn't. So there you go. No matter where you go, there you are.
I'm not sure how this film would hold up to modern day sensibilities, I suppose, and without significant rewrites and alterations and adaptations.
No, really? You don't think that the John Lithgow's Italian accent would be acceptable in today's society? or the Japanese guy saying, "Holy Toledo"?
Oh,
really?
Yeah, cultural appropriation. Oh, my God. Oh, now that's interesting. The current incarnation, and I didn't even know there was one, of Dick Tracy has had references to this. There's a business mentioned in one part of it, the Emilio Lizardo Crematorium, and Dick Tracy's granddaughter, Honeymoon, tells him she'll be attending a concert of the Hong Kong Cavaliers, hoping to get Perfect Tommy's autograph. And, Yoyodyne Propulsion Systems had an office on the promenade at Deep Space Nine. Can you imagine?
Really?
And yes, apparently.
Wow.
And in Ready Player One, Parzival appears in a Buckaroo Banzai costume for a date because the deal is you're supposed to wear the outfit from your favorite movie. And his date says, I like Buckaroo Banzai. So it's beloved by a certain sector of the universe. So there you go. And Yoyodyne has been mentioned in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Internet. And let's see, that whole thing with the walking closing credit sequence was used again, copied for The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, and Goldblum is in both of them, of course. So this thing has had some resonance and had a life after death, so to speak.
Yeah,
Look, you either love it or you hate it. You either get it or you're confused by it, and it's okay either way. It's no mark on you. It's just an offbeat, strange, weird movie. And I told my wife about it. She said, "Okay, I'll watch it with you." And as soon as that gloppy thing on the bottom of the car was shown, she tuned out because she isn't into gloppy things. And then afterwards, she said, "I didn't like it at all, but I did like the credit sequence at the end. That's the only part I liked." So there you go.
I'm going to admit, Tommy, I actually thought you were responsible for this movie.
Oh,
because you're constantly trying to get us to watch movies of this ilk, and so I thought you were going to be all over this one.
Wait. I would reject the concept that there are movies of this ilk. This is a kind of a one-of-a-kind strangeness. And Battlefield Earth doesn't even come into the same...
I was going to say, if you guys like this, then Battlefield Earth will be a piece of cake.
Yeah, well, anyway.
I honestly, I thought this lined up with your sensibilities, so I thought you were going to be effusive about this movie. I'm a little surprised that it dazed you like it did.
Well, I mean, I don't hate it. I didn't like. I'm not. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this is a film that I am particularly negative about. I'm more baffled than anything else, I think is the best way to put it. Like, it's so out there. And again, the thing that kept making the neurons in my head fire backwards was the fact that everything in the film that was so over the top and ludicrous, and yet it was being presented as normal, as just almost sort of run of the mill. Like, of course, your protagonist would be doing neurosurgery and then testing out his rocket car, and then going out to a band afterwards. Yeah.
Well, you sew them up for me. I got to go break the dimensional barrier. Pardon me, I'm busy.
And then go hit up a rock club after.
Oh yeah, and then it just shows you when you look at the quote unquote more legit things these people have done. I mean, Earl Rauch, the writer, did the script for Martin Scorsese for the, I think, awful musical New York, New York. As I said, the original cinematographer did Brewster McCloud, Altered States, and Blade Runner. And then they kicked him out and got in the guy that did Patton and Towering Inferno. And I mean, it's like you wonder how many people we all love and respect who are what you might call establishment filmmakers had this little pet project in their dark closet that someday they hope they get to do that's totally off the wall, unlike what they normally are known for.
Well, the other thing, too, that I have to say is that Peter Weller, he did a really good job in this. I mean, apart from the fact that he's not half Asian, he did that.
Curse his inability to be half Asian.
Exactly. But he
had
this commanding presence. Like, he's got like Peter Weller right off the bat, ever since I saw him in RoboCop, which is one of the first things that I saw him in. Like, he's got that face which is a little uncanny, sort of, I'm not even sure how to put it into words, but he did, I think, fit the bill in terms of projecting the charisma, the self-assuredness, and the confidence that you would need for a character like Buckaroo Banzai, which is apparently just someone who is like how would you say, like a prodigy almost, right? Like someone who can basically master anything that's given to them. And that's how he's portrayed.
So there's an interesting question I want to ask about that then. How would you stack him up against a character like, say, a Doc Savage? Because you've got a similar kind of concept there.
Yeah, in a way, you're right. It is kind of a Doc Savage-y part.
Well, that's what
idea.
That's what I was talking about.
Doc Savage is a big, muscular pulp hero. Buckaroo Banzai is nothing like that. So there's
right. What I mean, though, is that he's a polymath, and he has this group of exotic characters around him that are all kind of sort of guys that you call in to solve these.
Well, what about the Fury's Howlin' Commandos, where you had all the different guys, that Dum Dum Dugan and all the rest of them, that team concept where everybody brings something to the party. It's not that unusual in the annals of fiction or movies to have that kind of a crew.
But you guys, but that's the entire thing. And that's, if you go into this expecting that this is basically a Doc Savage pulp movie, except it's been blasted through the lens of the filter of the 80s, and Doc Savage has been transmogrified, or like he's been combined with David Bowie. You get Buckaroo Banzai.
That was a weird way to put it, but I got it. It's like, yeah,
There you go.
That's right, I guess.
There we
Well,
go.
here's from that story I was reading, which I should have given you the name of the guy, but I'd have to scroll up and lose this quote, so I'll give it to you after. The guy who claims it's his favorite movie of all time was writing about it, and he says, "I love the way it dropped this bizarre and complicated mythology into the laps of viewers without any elongated explanations, and assumed they would have the intelligence to figure things out as it went along. Now, this wasn't a completely unheard of approach. Star Wars began in much the same way, but it was taken to such a level here that you almost felt like you were watching chapter 5 of a serial where you'd already missed chapters 1 through 4.
That's what
Admittedly,
I mean.
this approach may have alienated as many viewers as it enchanted. Some reviewers complained they felt like they were watching someone else's private in-joke that made no effort to let them in on the fun. But to these eyes, the notion of creating this oddly detailed world with stuff practically bursting out of every jam-packed frame and then immersing viewers in it was an audacious approach that paid off beautifully." And here's the line I really like. "If you ever wondered what might have resulted if Robert Altman had been given the reins of a large-scale science fiction project, this film may be the closest we may ever come to answering that question." Isn't that interesting? And and there's all these in-jokes. They mentioned during the jet car experiment, we see a scientific gauge labeled SINE, as in sine wave, SINE, and then one marked sealed and one marked delivered. Signed, sealed, delivered. I'm yours. He quotes Dr. Lizardo quotes the Beach Boys sloop John B. by saying, "I feel so broke up, I want to go home." And then they mentioned Orson Welles, and the guy says, "The guy from the old wine commercials?" Now see, we talked before about how unrecognizable Ronald Lacey was. It never occurred to me they made him up to look like Charles Foster Kane. There you go. And
There you go.
Anyway,
All right. Well,
it's just strange and wonderful. I think it's not everybody's cup of tea, and yeah, it's bizarre, and you'll either like it or you won't like it. But I dare you to turn away, because I think you'll find it as sort of fascinatingly addictive to say, "Well, this is insane, but what the hell happens next?"
All right, I'll take that dare. As I was watching the movie, I kept checking the runtime to see how much more of this do I have to endure.
oh,
Yeah.
Lord.
And I accidentally hit the button and rewound it all the way back to the beginning of the movie, 10 minutes before the movie was to end. And I had to sit there for a moment and think seriously, am I really going to fast forward this thing all the way back just to watch the last 10 minutes? And I did, but
And it
just
was worth
because
it.
that's the job.
Well, you knew the job was dangerous when you took it, Fred. Laugh while you can, the monkey boy.
Okay, so I'm dying to ask this question then. Lorn, what are the things that you liked and disliked about this film?
It ended.
Oh.
And so that was you guys know what my least favorite movie is. And I know I take a lot of flack for my least favorite movie. It is The Fifth Element. I hated that movie. That is a movie that.
But this is a close second, right?
It may tie it.
Wow.
Honestly, not trying to be funny here at all.
No, I understand.
I did not like this movie. I did not enjoy this movie. This was a movie that I felt like there's very few times that I watch a movie that I can't take anything from it, and this was one of those times. I felt a little bit like there's a lot of really talented people here that I really enjoy watching most of the time, and the only thing that I can think while watching this movie is, why are any of you doing this? I was actually surprised that this didn't end some careers. I guess there is a cult following for it. A lot of people apparently like it. Don't put me in that category, because I would never watch this movie again.
Here's another little factoid I just found. Bagelman, as I told you, was fighting with them all the way about how he wanted them to do the movie. We find out that Richter first found the actor he wanted to play Buckaroo. Bagelman refused to cast him on the belief that that guy would never become a movie star. Tom Hanks.
Oh.
What would this movie have been like with Tom Hanks as Buckaroo Banzai?
Wow.
I would have hated it then, I think. So there you go.
No, I think you needed Peter Weller in this role. He brought something to it. And even some of the side characters, like, they did stand out, like Clancy Brown.
Yeah, who most people would know best, I guess, from the Highlander as the ultimate opposition to the Highlander.
And Perfect Tommy, who was Lewis.
Yeah. All of these guys. Well, what about Vincent Schiavelli, who was hired in so many roles as crazy people, basically because of how he looked, and Dan Hedaya, who people know as the boyfriend of Rhea Perlman on Cheers, and Bill Henderson, the father of the little boy. Everybody's seen him in a million different things, and like you said, there's it's a big movie for such a little movie. Just think about the cast. Yakov Smirnoff, like you mentioned. Anyway, I'm rattling on, and I shouldn't.
Well, what did you like and dislike about this film, Lou?
I like the sheer audacity of it, and that it's like they don't try too hard to explain anything. They just put it out there, and you either roll with it or you don't. If you don't, fine. If you do, swell. And either way, we're going to show you stuff you haven't seen before. It's got that going for it, even if you don't think anything else. Whether you should see it or want to see it, I guess it's up to, Chacun na son goût, each to his own taste, as the man said as he kissed the cow. But I just think it has a kind of a strange, weird, offbeat, unlike any other movie, charm all its own. And you take it on its own terms or you don't take it. And that's cool either way.
True enough. Well, I got to say, I like Peter Weller's performance. I thought it was audacious in what it was attempting to do. I don't know if it necessarily was able to do that. I do see how this could have developed a cult following, again, in the vein of Rocky Horror Picture Show. What I didn't like, I mean, when you sort of look at it from the lens of what I described it before, of being basically an 80s pulp Doc Savage production, a lot of it kind of gets explained away, but at the same time, it felt like there was almost too much going on. Like if they had dialed back a few things in this film, I think it might have perhaps been better accepted. Like it kept jumping from point to point. Really? Okay.
I think if they gave you a moment to catch your breath, you'd fall out of the magic of it. Whether you like the magic or not, once you're in that world, you have to stay in that world for the rest of it to work. And if they say, well, let's pause and take 5 minutes and let you all catch your breath, that's 5 minutes you shouldn't have. You just have to keep propelling yourself. That is the equivalent of you pushing that button, Lorn, to have to back up all the way and go forward again. But I'm not saying you would have liked it any better if you hadn't done that. I'm just saying this is the kind of movie that you jump in, you roll with it, and see where it takes you. And at the end, you might say, that was too weird for its own good. But at least you went with it that far. And I appreciate that. I really do. Commitment.
Something else I liked about the film, as you mentioned before, were just all of the various gags. At one point, the president is calling Buckaroo to figure out, so do we wipe Russia off the map or not? Yeah. And he gets handed this document, this folder, and inside of it is a short form declaration of war.
Right, the short form declaration of war. Well, just that whole thing with Orson, I'd completely forgotten about that, with Grover's Mill and Orson Welles being involved in the plot. If you never knew that, it doesn't mean anything to you watching the movie, but if you did, you go, oh, God. It's one of those, well, this explains it kind of moments that a lot of movies do in a funny way, and I think this one does too. But anyway, but as somebody who's literally driven by that dam you see in the background, which is right there alongside where the 405 and the 101 cross each other in the heart of the valley, it's nice to know, and it's been used in some music videos and other things. It's it's like Buckaroo walked here. It's one of those landmarks.
mean, even
I
the
don't
name
know that I would have
Buckaroo.
ever watched a sequel or a prequel or read the comic books or anything else. The fact that this exists in its own universe and that I got to take a little glimpse into that universe is enough for me. Don't get me wrong.
All right, so let me ask you another question then. If you were going to stack this movie up against, say, Pluto Nash or Leonard Part 6, where would you stack it?
Oh, are you kidding? No comparison whatsoever. No comparison. Those are people trying to do what this does. That's
Okay.
Lorn, that's a twist on my thing about what is cool and what acts cool. Only those were not as good as the Clooney gang being cool.
Well, that line that you said before about trying to act cool and those who were cool, that was going through my head as I was watching this, especially watching the performance of the Hong Kong Cavaliers and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so, Lou, were they acting cool or were they really cool in this film?
They were so cool, they didn't care if you thought they were cool or not. Unlike Frank and Dean and the gang, who were definitely saying, yeah, we are and you're not. Remember that thing I mentioned when we did that about the getting out of the helicopter with a Jack Daniels in one hand?
Right. Yeah.
These guys wouldn't even bother, It was like the helicopter's so far behind where they're at that who cares?
The helicopter's being piloted by one of the Blue Blazer regulars.
There you go. And also they built a world which the rest of the world isn't as weird as they are, but everybody knows about them. All those people that stand outside the gates, like the people who used to hang outside the gates of Neverland, of Michael Jackson's place out in the valley, or the people who would take the trips to the stars' homes, with the maps. The idea that everybody, if Buckaroo does something, it makes the news everywhere. The president gets asked about Buckaroo. The Secretary of Defense is asked about what's Buckaroo doing. Instantly, you don't have to believe that they're special and famous and wonderful. The world they're in is telling you that in every moment of this thing. So anyway,
true enough. Well,
it's a strange movie, gang. But for a couple of bucks or even free, this is even free if you have Amazon Prime.
On Amazon,
some night, when you're in the mood for something a little different, give it a peek and see what you think. If you haven't seen it.
And you feel like altering your perceptions of reality. Yes, for sure.
No, but it's not reality, and that's the point.
I know.
This is Uhura putting the guy in the closet and saying this isn't reality, it's fantasy, Well,
look, Lorn, any sort of closing words on this?
No, I mean, if somebody is able to watch this movie and enjoy it, then God bless them, because I really tried, but I just couldn't get there.
Well, I think we'll do better with you next time because we're going to something a little more conventional, and yet to a world that has passed to some degree, but was pretty darn real and pretty darn scary when it was happening, and that is the world of the Cold War. And for those who want to know who picked the next movie, our fearless leader, WDW Pro, picked it because it's one of his favorites. And, not because we're under any compulsion, but because we love him. We're doing his movie next time. And it's a bridge over troubled waters full of sneaky guys and noble guys. And it's pretty special, too. So he's going to be here with us then.
Yeah, that's going to be exciting. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for taking this trip into the eighth dimension with us. I don't know if we survived, but at least there was a couple of us made it back relatively unscathed.
Can I end it with the last line of this movie?
Go for it.
So what? Big deal.
Yeah, by that point, I'm just like, okay, whatever. Sure, why not? But anyway, have you seen this film? Have you watched Buckaroo Banzai? Are you a Blue Blazer
in training?
In training. Let us know your thoughts down below. Leave your comments. The audience members who recommended that we watch this film, thank you very much, I think. No, maybe you got
Did we do you proud? We hope so.
Yeah, except for Lorn, maybe. But if you have any other comments for the future, please don't hesitate to let us know if there are films that you think we should check out. We are brave and adventurous, and we will sally forth wherever duty may call. Right?
Right.
Yes. So on
Sure.
Where are we
Okay.
going?
that.
The eighth position. When are we going? Real soon. Okay.
Yeah, you guys give this movie a watch. Let us know what you think, and we will see you again next time on The Genre Guys. Thank you so much. We are out of here.
We hope you enjoyed that special presentation of The Genre Guys here on 23PO. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for more content like it. And if you want to enjoy every episode of The Genre Guys as soon as they are released, be sure to become a member at WW Pro's YouTube channel. What were your thoughts on this amazing film? Let us know in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching. T3PO. Please comment, like, and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe to That Park Place Podcasts Online, your source for exclusive content and highlights from WDW Pro, The Pro Show, and That Park Place for all the news that should be fun.